I want to talk about testimony. And I'm sure every one of us know the difference between memory and testimony. Covenant memory are the promises of God. Covenant testimony is the fulfillment of everything God has said. So when you say testimony, you're not talking about hoping for something, because hope is always reaching towards something. Hope, when someone say, I hope in the testimony, what you're actually telling us is that you are waiting for something. You are waiting. Hope waits. Faith reaches. When someone says, I have faith in God, you are saying, I'm reaching towards something. Or you say, I have faith in this. I have faith in that. It's like you are reaching towards something. But when you see this table here, this is not hope. This is not faith. This is not desire. When you have desire, desire is always striving. Striving is what we were taught on Sunday. Striving is manufacturing. Striving is creating, generating movements. Striving is spiritual industry. Striving is trying to produce. Striving is trying to prove something. Striving is trying to secure something. So this is not, when you talk about testimony, you're not talking about faith. Because faith is always reaching towards something. But when you talk about testimony, faith is rested. Faith is rested. It is no longer reaching towards, it is rested. When you say hope, hope is always waiting. But we are not hoping anymore. Our hope is anchored. It is already anchored. When you say desire, our desire is not striving anymore. We were striving in the many months of the journey. We were striving, moving towards inheritance. But now, when you talk testimony, desire is settled. Please observe those things. Faith is no longer reaching towards. Faith is resting. Hope is no longer waiting. Hope is anchored. Desire is no longer striving. Desire is settled. And that's testimony. That's why we are saying when we come to the table, we're not striving. We're not hoping. We are not exercising faith. Faith always reaches towards something. But we are not in the dispensation of faith, reaching towards inheritance that was sealed on 5th April 2026. Inheritance is not something we're hoping for. It is not something we're desiring. Inheritance is not something that we have faith towards. Inheritance was sealed. And remember, in the word sealing, we were told on that day that when something is sealed, it is no longer open. No longer open to movements. No longer open to human activity, no longer open to additions. It's no longer open. And the mistake we can do if we don't know how to live in the realm of testimony is to try to open processes that God has closed. It's to try to open a process to move towards inheritance when God has already said inheritance is no longer open. That thing is sealed, it is closed. You can't be starting, you can't be having prayers of spiritual industry. Prayers are not supposed to be prayers where you are begging. Prayers in our situation, we are supposed to be aligning ourselves to what He has already done. Align yourself If you made any prayer this morning and you are praying for something, like you are begging for something, then this is how you mess the testimony. Testimony is believing it's done. Testimony is believing no more journey. Testimony is believing no more human activity, no more addition. Testimony means no more hope. Testimony means no more desire. Testimony means no more faith. Those things are over. Testimony means come to the table, partake. Come to the table, participate. Live from what God has sealed. And that has to be the testimony in our hearts. Not trying to make prayers of begging. Not trying to make prayers that are creating things. Like we were warned on Sunday, not trying to make prayers to secure outcomes. Because it's so easy to leave testimony, which is supposed to work by itself. Testimony is a reality that works all by itself. And everything we are saying about rest, everything we're saying about the table, everything we're saying about inheritance, everything that was sealed on that day, the cup of the Lord was sealed on that day, the table of the Lord was sealed that day, the bread, the body of Christ was sealed that day, everything was sealed. Our journey in the 33 judicial confirmations was sealed that day. You only come and partake. You don't make prayers that are supposed to be asking for those things anymore. That will be contradicting what God has done. And that is what we were warned about. You cannot be producing what is already provided. Why produce, turn these stones to bread? Why produce what is already provided? What do you need stones to become bread for when the bread is on the table? Bread is already provided on the table. You're not supposed to move in and partake. You're not supposed to prove anything out there. When God gave you a seat at his table, that's the greatest identity. Sit at the table as a son. Sit at the table as a covenant daughter, as a covenant son, as a son of Abraham, as a daughter of Abraham. You have a seat at the table. In the same way, Mephibosheth, who was a cripple, found a space in the table, not because he qualified, but because of covenant faithfulness, a covenant made between David and Jonathan. Even us, we are accessing the table today, not because we qualified. We are seated at the table today because of our Father's covenant faithfulness. His covenant faithfulness gives us a space at the table. We could be crippled. It doesn't matter. That is no longer our worry. What we love more is not our ability to walk. What we are looking for, remember, there are weights, measures that were adjusted in our lives. That before then, what you called breakthrough or what inside of you was of priority is your ability to work. Our ability to work is not what we are looking for. It is not more glorious than my seat at the table. My seat at the table, my identity at the table is more glorious, whether I will walk or not walk. Even Mephibosheth knew very well, I'm going to take my place, my seat at the king's table. I am a cripple, yes, I know. And I know I've made no contribution in Israel because the people who sit at the table in the days of those kings are those people who've made contributions. They've done exploits like David and his mighty 3 men ate from the table. They have made contributions. They earned the right to sit at the table. But here comes a guy, no standing, no achievement, no nothing. And David recognizes, I have made a covenant with David. And therefore you cripple, come and have your seat at the table. And the king said, the Mephibosheth will permanently sit at my table. And the table stands for provisions. The table stands for inheritance. The table stands for covenant fulfillment. The table stands for victories that the Lord will give. That's why David says, you set a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Not that when the enemies came, that's when you set the table. No, I live in the reality of a set table. My cup overflows. My covenant realities overflows. I live in a reality, whether there are enemies around me or not, whether there are cripples around me or not, or whether I have issues or not. This is what has finally happened. That God, you set a table for me. Table means fulfillment. And let me say this because I will come to these things. God allowed us to restore every other thing in June last year, but never allowed us during our courtroom commissioning to set a table. Never allowed us to set the seats. Because what we did in June last year, what we did was foundational. We needed to bring the reality of the blood. That's foundational. We needed to restore the priesthood. That's why we have the priestly garments. That is foundational. It's the foundation of a house. We needed to come back to altar realities. That is foundational. Very foundational. We needed to come to the cross. That is foundational. And when you are laying the foundation of a house, it's not the time to put a table. You bring a table when the house is complete. And that's why on 5th April 2026, God having declared the journey complete and this covenant house finished and established, he then gave us a table. Because the table is not foundational. The table is consummational. It consummates. It is something that comes at the end. It is the consummation of something, the finishedness of something, the end of something. And that's why in June last year, he couldn't give us the table. Because how give us the table and yet the inheritance was still hidden? Give us the table and still we didn't even know who we are. We were still to become witnesses. We were still to become covenant witnesses. We were still to understand altar realities. We were still to understand covenant. We were still to understand how the altar breathes. We were still to understand witnesshood. We were still to understand those things. We walked all the journey, and you know the last 5 steps. Inheritance began to be revealed because it was hidden. And then that time God couldn't bring the table when the inheritance is hidden. Then when took us a process of inheritance verified, mercy and rest came forth so that he can remove all the unlawful conditions within us that were hindering the inheritance from settling down. And we became verified. And then after that, we became authorized, driving license. We became authorized. The inheritance was now lawful to operate among us. And we became lawful vessels. And then later on, God gave us a demonstration through River Road on how inheritance governs. And later on, spoke to us and showed us what is in our hands. It is like diamond. The inheritance was revealed. Now, after all that, that's when he gives us the table. You can now sit and partake. So we got to learn how to be making prayers. I start a journey with you today. Like, would you say, I have faith in inheritance? You are wrong. You can't say I have faith in inheritance. Our faith is not reaching towards inheritance. You're only supposed to say, my faith is rested. Jesus is reclining at Bethany. At that time, you can't say, I have faith in Jesus' arrival. Don't go. I'll say when to go. Everybody sit. Sit. So, I'll tell you when to go. You can't say, I have faith, or you're hoping. You're hoping for inheritance. Hope. Then you begin to open what God has sealed. You begin to open processes God has concluded. This is where we went wrong. He said at the cross, it is finished. What did we do? We went back to produce what he has produced. He told us, you are my sons. What did we do? We went to have authority displays, power spectacles. Throw yourself down. Prove you're a son. And we were warned on Sunday and told, why prove? Why prove what is already true? Why prove what is already true? This is a different ground. And we must clear a shift from the other ground, because what governs our lives is a word called testimony. And testimony means it's done. Testimony means it's happening now. Testimony is what Peter says. This is that which was written. It was memory then. But we can feel it. Testimony worked on us. We found ourselves speaking in strange tongues. Before the testimony worked on us, we were cowardly and locked ourselves in the room. Right now, we are so bold. Testimony is at work. It is not a promise anymore. This is that. And you know, I love when Peter says, this is not only for us, it is also for our children and those who are afar off. You cannot be promising children what is not present. You promise children what is there. And those who are afar off begin to get invited into the same reality. Everybody must understand where we are. We'll be learning. You see, like there's a pattern of prayer that was made by Paul to the Philippians. And he says, do not be anxious about anything. What is the meaning of that? Do not be worried. Do not be anxious about your life when the inheritance is sealed. Those two things can't go together. You cannot be worrying about your life when he has declared inheritance is sealed. That's why we can take that prayer by Paul. Do not be anxious. Anxiety can run your life. Do not be anxious about anything, but in all situations. Meaning, we have situations, we have circumstances. We have situations, we have circumstances. In all situations, make prayers, petitions with thanksgiving to God. And you wonder why put thanksgiving? Make prayers. That means prayers are not to ask. Whoever taught us prayers is just asking. In a realm of inheritance, prayer is not asking. Prayer is aligning myself. So instead of being anxious, instead of worrying, I align. I say, oh God, you said inheritance is sealed. So I'm aligning. That's the prayer I'm making. I am not saying, oh Father, release the inheritance. Wrong. Wrong. The table is set. So he says, make prayers. Make petitions. The word petition is a word of law. And petition is when, Elder Morris, you present a matter before a court of law. Make your petitions. That's why they say a petition about elections. Petitions, in other words, you are making a petition before God. And what are you doing? You are making petitions within the reality of what he has provided. Yes, you said inheritance has arrived. You said I am at rest, but why am I troubled? At least you have said we are in a season of rest, but I am troubled. So make petitions. Petition according to what he has already done. You don't petition according to something that is not done. You petition because it is done. You petition because inheritance is sealed. You petition because inheritance is finished. You petition because arrival has happened. You petition because we are no longer journeying towards. You petition because we have arrived. You petition. You make petitions in alignment to what he has done. And he says, with thanksgiving. Why? Because I'm thanking you because the inheritance is settled. I'm thanking you because the inheritance is sealed. Even if I am sick, I thank you because the inheritance is sealed. Even if I am sick, I thank you because I'm drinking from the cup. I have access to the cup that is the blood of the new covenant. I eat of your body that makes you whole. In other words, I eat of the reality of who Christ is. So I am thanking you for the sacrifice of Jesus at the cross. I'm thanking you for 33 judicial confirmations, a completed journey before you. So I'm thanking you, even if I'm making my requests and I'm making my petitions. And he says, when you do that, then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and mind. It will guard your mind from trying to manufacture things. It will guard your mind from trying to figure out solutions you were given like the ones Abraham and Sarah were seeking. You know, they seek for solutions. That was a mind issue. But the same inheritance that we have is guarding our mind. And is also guarding our hearts from frustrations. Yes, in real situations, we can find hard situations and we can be frustrated. But do not be anxious about anything. But in all situations, in every circumstance, make your prayers or make your requests and petitions with thanksgiving. Make your prayers and petitions to God with thanksgiving. With thanksgiving. And if you do that, the peace of God that surpasses our understanding, that you cannot explain, that you cannot tell why am I not surprised when I'm supposed to be surprised. I cannot tell why I am not shocked when normal humans are in shock. I cannot tell why I am stable and having stability when everybody else is having instability. The peace of God that surpasses our understanding will guard your heart from slipping back to spiritual industry, from seeking back use what is already produced, from slipping back to try to prove what is already true. Guard your heart from trying to slip back to secure things that have already been promised, to look for shortcuts. It will guard your heart. The peace of God will guard your heart and will guard your mind. Your mind is where your troubles are. Your mind is where you try to figure out stuff. Your mind is where you try to be wise. Your mind is where you try to be the source of something. From now onwards, you are not the source. Testimony is the source. Testimony is the source. So I need to say, testimony. If you recall the words that were said, testimony is the operating reality governing the realm of rest. just like testimony governed the early church. I don't know whether you've read the scriptures. Anytime they continue to testify, what do you testify? You testify the testimony. You witness to the testimony. Every time they testified to the testimony, what was the testimony? He is risen. We were told on Sunday how they went to the gate called Beautiful, and how, because of settled identity and rested authority, they told the cripple, rise up and walk. Why? Because what you didn't know is what was inside them. Actually, they have already embodied, not just believed, they have embodied the testimony. Remember your definition. Every one of us, we were told, when you are a witness, you don't just talk about it. You carry it. You embody it. The vision of the valley road showed keys all around us, authority that we carry. It is not something we manufacture. It's something that we carry. So they carried the testimony. They moved from, the testimony is that he is risen. Then number two, they recognized the testimony. And then number three, they inhabited the testimony. And then number four, they embodied it. The testimony has a body now walking in the earth. So therefore, that testimony can use that body's mouth. In the name of Jesus, rise up and walk. It is a testimony using the mouth of Peter. It is the realm of testimony. And the Bible said the more they testified, the more the people were healed, and the more their numbers multiplied. So what is this testimony? I want to take us through something that helps us to understand testimony is now you are operating reality in the realm of rest.